Pokémon is one of the biggest global franchises, with the Pokémon Company being worth a staggering $92 billion. They've accumulated more revenue than the Star Wars franchise, Marvel Cinematic Universe, as well as Disney's Starboy Mickey Mouse. But how did they manage to amass this type of wealth? I'm Senor Donor, and today we'll be answering that question. Join me as we explore the history of Pokémon Red and Pokémon Blue. Our story begins in 1990, where a young 24-year-old game developer named Satoshi Tajiri came up with an idea. When Satoshi was a child, one of his favourite hobbies was collecting insects. As he was starting to grow up, his town started to become more urbanised, with shops, businesses and more properties occupying spaces. This resulted in less insects being around the town, and more kids spending time in their homes. Well, Satoshi wanted these kids to experience what it would be like to collect insects and what it was like when he was growing up. Satoshi's idea was to create a game where the player would explore the world, catching insect-like creatures which he called Pokémon. He believed that by allowing players to name their Pokémon and control them, that this would serve as a stress reliever. However, Satoshi did not believe in violence within video games. For this reason, Pokémon would only faint in battle as opposed to dying. Satoshi also wanted players to be able to trade their Pokémon with each other, but to overcome this hurdle, consoles would need to be able to link together. Well, that's where the Nintendo Game Boy shows just what it's made of. When the Game Boy released in 1989, it came bundled with a Game Link cable. This allowed two Game Boys to connect to each other for multiplayer gaming. And get this, they didn't charge you an annual subscription. Satoshi's mentor Shigeru Miyamoto, who by the way worked on Mario, Donkey Kong and Zelda titles to name a few, thought it would be wise to make two different cartridges containing different sets of Pokémon. He believed this would boost the trading aspect of the game as well as interaction with others. Two of the main characters were based on Satoshi and Miyamoto. First was Satoshi, who you'll know as Red in the games, as well as Shigeru, who was known as Blue. Satoshi's lifelong friend Ken Sugimori agreed to develop and draw the designs of all 151 Pokémon, being aided by a small team. And let's be honest guys, if you grew up in the Red and Blue era, these designs definitely bring you back to the good old days. Nowadays kids are used to Dynamaxing, terrestrializing and skating on the goddamn sidewalk, but the streets will never forget Mega Revolutions. Drop your favourite Megas in the comments. Satoshi went for a few name ideas for the franchise before they settled with Pokemon. At first he wanted to call it Capsule Monsters, followed by Capumon, but finally concluded with Pocket Monsters, or Pokemon for short. The Capsule Monsters name originated from the Ultra 7 TV show from 1967, with Satoshi being inspired by the show as a kid. When developers start working on a game, their intention is to design a good product, but as you know, more often than not we're left with a half-baked game at launch. With that in mind, let's take a look at how Red and Blue played. You control the game's protagonist, in which you'll be traversing the game world, battling other trainers and gym leaders, catching all 151 Pokemon and becoming a Pokemon Master on your way. When you run into another trainer or wild Pokemon, you'll be switched into the battle screen, in which you'll take turns attacking. When a Pokemon's health is reduced to 0, they faint and you'll gain some experience points. These experience points are key to leveling up your Pokemon in order for them to evolve and learn new moves. There were several ways to evolve your Pokemon. Some needed to reach a certain level, some would require an elemental stone, while some would need to be traded. You just need to hope your friend would send your evolved Pokemon back. My friend Dustin did a run with my Alakazam, and to that I say you, Dustin. To become a Pokemon Master, you're going to need to complete your Pokedex. To do this, you'll be catching a lot of wild Pokemon. When in battle with a wild Pokemon, you can throw a Pokeball at them to catch them, and if you do manage to catch it, it will join you permanently on your journey. There are several factors that will affect your chance of capturing them on, including how much HP they have, the type of Pokeball used, and if they're affected by a status move. As we touched on earlier, you could also use a link cable to battle and trade other players. They need to be close by though, as these were local functions. Before Pokemon Red and Blue released internationally across 1998 to 1999, there were some earlier versions that released exclusively in Japan. On February 27th, 1996, Pokemon Red and Green released in Japan. They weren't flying off the shelf to begin with, but the hype picked up and so did the sales. It was decided that another version of the game would also be released exclusively to subscribers of the Koro comic in October 1996. Koro was a comic series that was targeted towards children. It featured articles on Digimon, Super Mario and Beyblade to name a few. They called this game Pokémon Blue, which featured new artwork and dialogue. Nintendo and Game Freak decided to use the Japanese version of Pokémon Blue as the blueprint, pardon the pun, for the international versions of Red and Green. These international versions of the game would be renamed to Red and Blue and are the versions that you most likely grew up with. Nintendo wanted to give the games the promotional backing they'd need to succeed overseas. They spent over $50 million on promotion, but were nervous that the American demographic may dislike the games. This was due to the fact that some of the Pokemon looked too cutesy and didn't look scary enough. Nintendo were given the chance to redesign some of the Pokemon in order to appeal to to the American audience. Hiroshi Yamauchi had a clear vision for the titles and refused any visual overhauls on any of the 151 Pokemon. Red and Blue released in America and Australia in 1998, with the Europeans getting their hands on the game in October 1999. The games were immediate hits, receiving positive review scores from a multitude of different publications. IGN gave it a 10 out of 10 and labelled the game a masterpiece back in 1999, and that was way before the too much water meme was a thing. They would go on to win the Outstanding Achievement in Character or Story Development Award in 1999, and to give you an idea on the significance of that award, Baldur's Gate 3 is the current holder, and I've heard people quite like that game too. In 1996, Japan had sold over 1 million copies of the games combined, and went on to sell another 3.5 million units in 1997. These sales weren't slowing down anytime soon, as over 10 million units had been sold by 1998, and remember, these are only Japan's figures. 4 million copies were sold in the United States in 1998, with 200,000 of those being in the first 2 weeks. What makes this even more wild is the game's released in September 1998, so those 4 million units sold within 3 months. In 1999 it became the best-selling game of the year, and another 6 million units were sold. We like the games over here in Europe too, as by 1999 the games had grossed approximately $65 million. All in all, the game sold over 31 million units worldwide, and I know I was responsible for at least 2 of those. Well, not me because I was a kid and didn't have any money, but well, you know what I mean. When your game goes on to outsell Final Fantasy VII, it's time to meet up with the lads and go on a bender, followed closely by buying a Ferrari. Pokemon didn't become one of the highest grossing global franchises with games alone. They ventured into the trading card market, movie and television, as well as, well, more games of course. So let's have a brief look into these other ventures that also surrounded the releases of Red and Blue. The Pokemon TV series would premiere in Japan on April 1st, 1997. This was roughly a year after the original Red and Green games hit the market. 4Kids Entertainment would go on to obtain the marketing rights for the United States in 1998 and would be responsible for localizing the episodes for an English audience. The series would debut a month before Red and Blue released in stores and gave its audience a taste of what Pokemon was about, and also helped to build up some hype. By 2000, the series was also on VHS and DVD and sold approximately 25 million units in 2000 alone. The trading card game, or TCG for short, was released in Japan in 1996 and would be published by Wizards of the Coast in the United States in December 1998. Now, there were people that actually would play the game, and there were others that would just collect them, like me for example. Some of the original cards are worth a fortune, with this 1999 Charizard being worth $420,000. Pokemon Yellow released in Japan and internationally from 1998 to 2000. This version featured several improvements like Pokemon sprites being updated, Jesse and James being added, and support for the Game Boy printer. You could connect the device to your Game Boy to print Pokédex entries, Pokemon in your party, as well as your storage boxes. This was some cool ass shit at the time, guys. In Japan, Yellow sold over 1.5 million units in 1998. It sold over 1 million units in the United States in the first 10 days and sold over 600,000 units in the United Kingdom. It was clear at this point that the Pokemon franchise was soaring to the moon like Lunala and big pimpin' like that Squirtle with sunglasses. Ladies and gents, subs and non-subs, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, you know what to do. You've heard it all a million times. All of my socials can be found in my description. And remember, I'll never be a real YouTuber until I've released an apology video. Or 2. That's all, guys. Peace out.